in season 2, episode 6, you're really the one that convinces Melanie to pull that lever.
Oh, wait a
You're
second.
the one. You're the one that
Wait a
goes against
second.
Mr. Wilford. You're the exact antagonist to the whole thing. You're the real trigger to the whole war. So I'm curious about your thoughts about it.
I think this was a decision that had to be made, and I think that ultimately he's trying to convince her to make the right decision. We just saw what happened to people who tried to board the train. There were scientists, there were people that were vital to the journey, and they were kind of gunned down in cold blood. So they needed to go. They just needed to go. And it's kind of like what's left of humanity and seeing if we can save humanity, the idea of taking off, because it was getting impossible to be outside or waiting around. That was our chance to take the train from the beast that is Wilford. I agree, he was a big catalyst, but Melanie could have said no.
It's true, and I was surprised you convinced her to let go of Alex in a way. And
these, that they're scientists, so it's it was a really tough scene. It was a really kind of tough scene, and I know that it was needed. I'm really glad that they showed it, because I think people needed to see why, or how a mother could ever do that. I think I think that it was a scenario in which literally it was so many lives against one, and that's the only thing that could have made sense.
Do you believe Javi was really, locked away in the bathroom, actually going, or did he just not want to be a part of it?
I could see that, I could see that maybe he would have had a heads up, could have got a heads up from Bennett. But, maybe not, and maybe I think it's more interesting if he didn't know, because it explains a lot of his coming to terms with that over the years of them being on the road or on the track, should I say. And, it certainly explains his frustrations in season 1.
I just wanted to ask you quick. Do you understand Hebrew? I saw you were from Haifa, so אני חייב לשאול.
כן, וניר Regev, right?
כן.
Yeah. So my Hebrew is pretty bad, and יש לי מבטא עכשיו שאני מדבר עברית, אבל קצת. But yeah, I was born in Haifa. I lived there until I was 10. Yeah, I thought you were going to open with that, and then.
אני מקריית מוצקין, אז הייתי
Okay.
חייב לשאול.
ויטקין, רחוב ויטקין.
What do you have to say to all the Israeli Snowpiercer fans out there?
Shalom. Thank you so much for watching. It's incredible. Incredible that I'm able to do this and to say toda rabba. And thank you. Please keep watching.
Yeah, so I've already seen the next 2 episodes, although I won't spoil them here. And I will say that you take a lot of hits. I'm curious about the physical combat training that you did for these particular next episodes and in general.
Usually Bennett isn't in the middle of all that stuff. I'm usually at the front looking out for obstacles and things on the track. So it was exciting to be able to get physical. And it is, from my experience of doing other stuff where you need to be physical, it's just, you need to take at least that, at least for me anyway, at least the week before. I mean, I try and exercise anyway, because I feel like, we just live in a world now where people just exercise, and I always found exercise was kind of, it helped me kind of get out of my head for an hour. So it was almost kind of like a form of meditation. So I've always done a bit of exercise, but I can go from like a monk to like, a terrible specimen kind of thing. So I have my ups and downs when it comes to kind of keeping healthy. But with regards to this, I know that I need to, at least for, a week or as much as I can, like stretch as the days leading up to that. Like, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 45 now, so I'm not as I don't bounce as well as I used to. So but it's because the first couple of times you do something, you're so excited that you pulled something off, and you're like, and you hit yourself and you're like, oh, I'm fine, and then like an hour later, you're just walking around going, I don't know how I can continue to do this, because it's just the pain is just insane, or you kind of really feel it the next day. So it's from experience, and you just have to stretch and to make sure that you're ready that day to just keep going, because there's people holding heavy cameras. There's, people running around to kind of get this stuff. It's not just about you. So you just have to be ready to kind of, you have to be ready to kind of bounce back and to go again.
Mr. Wilford has kind of mocked Ben all season about, his relationship with Melanie. Yeah, and I'm curious if you'd like a similar flashback to the way we saw what happened between Snowpiercer and Big Alice to show how that whole relationship started with Miss Cavill.
Well, I think that firstly, Mr. Wilford is a psychopath. So he is, he's all there because he's incredibly smart and charming, but he is, what he could be thinking that I was responsible for, or that Bennett was responsible, is one thing, but he knows that, we stole the train from him. So, and he knows that I must be privy to so much of what Melanie says that he isn't. And I think that eats him up. But would I like a scene with Sean Bean where we explain this? Hell yeah. So Graham, if you're watching, I'd love that. Yeah.
Actually curious, as Mr. Wilford goes, do you think eventually Revolutions kind of spiral and crash, so to speak, because people want a return back to, regular life? They tire of the unknown, and they want to get back to that creature comfort of what they knew.
Well, they haven't really known that under Wilford, really. They've known it for a short amount of time, and he is, or they will know it, and he is, he's so unpredictable and crazy that it makes you think that the first season was all was all about a revolution. But what Melanie realizes throughout towards the end of the first season is that the cost of that order is like it's very similar to our world. There's too many people suffering for it, and I don't think she deals with that very well, and she abdicates. So I think any order that we see is always going to be at the cost of suffering for for the greater majority.
Did you also get kind of World War II vibes when he gives the decision to exterminate the people? And I mean, I'm not going to mention in the next episode, but in that one scene in the flashback, when he tells Jesse to shoot.
Yeah, it's it's so cold-blooded, and I think the idea that there's snow there as well, it's very kind of reminiscent of those images. But I feel like, if anything, it is a window into who that man is and how unpredictable he is, and what a violent streak he has in him, and what a cold-blooded streak he has in him. I mean, he's like a master manipulator.
Ben's kind of part of propagating a lie, not once but twice. First, the whole idea of having a fake Mr. Wilford that Melanie plays off, and then later, when they don't know if Melanie's okay, asking Ruth to continue the belief, I suppose, that she's still out there, even though they have no response. And so obviously Ben does believe that the lie for the greater good is I don't want to say the right move, but a required move, I suppose. And I was wondering what
I think also, it's so touch and go, because our aim is to go and find Melanie, and what we need to do is get to a certain point in time where we have arranged to meet her, and the fact that Ben and Harvey have lost contact with her, if that gets out, it's too unpredictable how people will react. And if that lie is also so much about keeping hope alive, and once that hope goes, it's harder to stand up to the other powers that be, and especially Wilford. He's probably not going to want to stop for her. So yeah, I think that he is. I think this is a special circumstance where, and I think the way Alison said, so we lie, as Ruth. I don't think it's an easy decision for anyone.
Why do you think I find it curious that Mr. Wilford hired Ben, because he seems to have so much resentment for him in every single scene. So I'm kind of curious what you think of how the whole thing came about, or was it out of necessity that he was one of the top engineers in the world that he hired?
That's the only way I can make sense of it. And also, don't forget, when he hired Ben, Ben and Melanie might have had some knowledge of each other through the science world, but throughout the process of building this thing and realizing this idea, they would have created some form of relationship, whether it was friendly or whether it was any kind of romance to it. Or I feel like there is real community in being in the trenches, kind of building stuff and creating things and going over problems and trying to find out why things aren't working. So that's kind of I always assumed that would have been very bonding. And like I said before, it's I think for me, it's imagining that, he's just not privy to the stuff that we talk about, or how open Melanie can be with Ben. And that's probably what fuels his mind now. And like this, he's made up his mind of what that is, so yeah. But I think, going back to your question about why he hired him, I have to assume that Ben is just a great, engineer, and he's a great scientist and knows what he was doing.
Going back to the idea of justice for the greater good, Ben kind of overlooks, in a way, what happens with Josie, in that interrogation room.
Mm-hmm.
Never really hear him badger Melanie about it. And I'm curious, why that is. Is it from the same place that it needed to be done, which is kind of similar to what Mr. Wilford would say in a way?
I think that, Ben can't even begin to imagine what Melanie has had to do during the day before she gets to the engine. And I don't know if, in the first episode, we see Melanie having this crazy day. And then at the end of the day, she walks into the engine and she kind of takes over. So I don't think he would ever pretend to know how hard what her job is and how hard it is to balance her, her moral compass during the day. So I think there's probably stuff that he just wouldn't interfere in, regardless of how he feels about it, because I think that there would be too much.
Where would you like to see the character of Ben move from here? I mean, you never really see what he wants past. Essentially, he's on the same wavelength as Melanie, but he should have so much leverage because he's one of the top engineers in the train.
Right.
And though he takes things into control quite often, you never really see his desires of what he would like to mold the train or the world.
I think that's a great question. And I think that, there's so many cast members on this show. So I don't envy the writer's job on a show of this magnitude, like that, the size and cast size. So I would love to have all of that stuff, but I think going forward, that's probably what I want. That stuff that, as I think about Ben's character, that is stuff that I would love to know. But I think we find out a bit more about him in season 3 from what I've seen so far. But yeah, I think that getting hints of his history and hints of, like you say, his desires and what his wants are and what his personal journey or what his own kind of mission is, I would like I would love a window to that stuff, and so far, it feels like I'm going to see more of that, but yeah, that's obviously stuff that I want as an actor.
I spoke to Tom Lipinski the other day, and I asked him about if he knew that he would be returning to the series. And he said no originally, which surprised me. So I'm curious, do you guys take the scripts one day at a time? You don't have any kind of like real...
I think that comes from like a contract situation, whether you are contracted for ahead of time, you're contracted for all episodes produced, or whether you are contracted to have a recurring character on a show. And I think that, when you're a recurring character, as a performer, you get the freedom to also go and be on other shows and do other stuff. But you're not necessarily as privy to the episodes and the continuation of what you're doing in the show. And when you are contracted to do all the shows, you don't have the luxury of going to do something else when you're not on an episode, because you have to be there. But you do get to understand a bit more of how many episodes, or you have that kind of I guess the security of knowledge that you'll be there and you'll be taking part in all the episodes. So I think it's to do with the contracts that you sign.
What do you think Ben feels about Miss Audrey's apparent defection? I'm curious because you guys kind of ailed her on.
Yeah. I think he's pissed, and I also think I don't think he's surprised. I think Wilford is a like master of manipulation. He is, you know, there's almost like it's kind of like Ted Bundy-esque kind of like charming character that is just so evil. And, you know, what he does to Tom Lipinski's character, you know, and the way he treats that, he is exactly the person that myself, that Bennett and Melanie knew couldn't be in charge of what was left of humanity when that train departed the platform. So I don't think he's surprised, but I think he's pissed.
Why do you think Ben allowed the tail to exist? He seems like the type that would, be completely against the idea of people being kept there.
That's a good question. I think that it's probably something that he thinks about, and I think that maybe order becomes something that's very attractive to live in, and
like Mr. Wilford.
Well, no, there's a sense, of course, for him, it's, for him, he's kind of like, I guess he's very violent with people and he kind of punishes people, but it's very hard for me to kind of make sense of why a character would want other characters like that to kind of live in those conditions. I don't even know if I have an answer for you, but I think it's, the only way that you could maybe make sense of it is the idea of the most important thing is to keep the train moving.
There was something that stuck with me that Mr. Wilford said to Leighton about, you don't even know how to run the train. You're not an engineer. And I thought about the practicality of that. And is that really the center of the whole struggle, that at the end of the day, there's just a practicality to, who has the knowledge and who doesn't? Well, I mean, which is why Ben is at the front of the train to begin with. And has different conditions.
but what you also need is, I kind of like that you picked up on that, because there is obviously a value on this journey of, the technical abilities, the abilities, the knowledge of science and the engineering skills of these guys that are able to drive the train. But, I don't think Leighton ever wanted to be a politician. I don't think he ever wanted to kind of be the leader. I know that he just wanted to kind of create democracy. So he's just as valuable, if you think, because without it, like, it will just be a train of like 3 people, like at the end of it. So we need, people like Leighton are so valuable, and that's kind of what Wilford doesn't see, perhaps.
I'm curious, how are you recording now during the pandemic? Do you guys have to get tested before shooting?
Oh yeah,
there is. Like, how does it work?
There is testing 3 times a day. So I have a test at 12 o'clock, where they will come here. So when you're on set, you get tested on set, but you basically get tested 3 times a week. And then there's kind of zones. So actors that will be on stage will be kind of like, there will be kind of a red zone, and you're just wearing masks up until the time where you're working with each other. And there is safety in taking off the mask and working together, because everyone's been tested. But still, these are very, very tricky working conditions, and everyone, everyone is dealing with it in their own ways, and productions have success with it, and productions have to learn lessons with it. So I think everyone's just getting used to it. But everyone just wants to be safe, and everyone wants to work. So we're doing what we have to do to get it done.